Second date, a true story from Mexico City. This is a true story. It happened in Mexico City in an old apartment building in Colonia, Roma during the season of Dia de los Muertos last year. The woman who lived through this sent me everything, screenshots of messages, photographs, and the things she found in her mother's house afterward. I will show you at the end. But first, I need you to understand something. If you are using a dating app right now, if you are talking to someone online who seems too good to be true, someone who says all the right things, who remembers every detail about you, who makes you feel like you have finally found the one, listen to this story until the end. Because sometimes the person on the other side of the screen is not a person at all. Sometimes they have been waiting for you for a very, very long time. Lucia Herrera was 26 years old when this happened. She worked as an administrative assistant for an import-export company in Polanco, a job that paid enough to afford a small studio apartment in Colonia, Roma, one of those neighborhoods in Mexico City where old buildings stand shoulder to shoulder with trendy cafes and mezcal bars. She had lived there for 2 years alone in a building that was constructed sometime in the 1940s. The walls were painted a faded yellow that might have been cheerful once, but now looked like old teeth. The elevator worked most days, though it groaned and shuddered as if complaining about its age. The hallway lights flickered. The pipes made sounds at night like someone whispering through metal. None of this bothered Lucia. She had grown up in Guadalajara, where her grandmother's house was even older, where the floorboards creaked and the doors never closed properly, and everyone said it was just the house settling. She did not believe in ghosts. She did not believe in curses. She believed in working hard, paying her rent on time, and someday finding someone who would love her the way her parents loved each other. That last part was the problem. 3 months before this story begins, Lucia's boyfriend of 3 years had ended their relationship. He said he needed space. He said he was not ready for commitment. He said all the things men say when they mean something else entirely. Lucia had cried for 2 weeks, then stopped crying and started wondering what was wrong with her. Why did no one stay? Why was she always the one left behind? She was not ugly. She was not boring. She had a good job, good friends back home, a family who loved her. And yet at 26, she was alone in a city of 9 million people, sleeping in a bed meant for 2, checking her phone every morning, hoping anyone had reached out. No one ever did. Her apartment was small enough that she could see almost all of it from any given point. The kitchen was a corner with a 2-burner stove and a refrigerator that hummed too loudly. The bathroom was barely big enough to turn around in, with a mirror that always fogged up even when she was not showering. The main room served as bedroom, living room, and everything else. Her bed was pushed against one wall beneath a window that looked out onto an interior courtyard where pigeons nested and old women hung their laundry. She had tried to make the space feel like home, a small altar for Dia de los Muertos on a shelf by the door, photographs of her family, taped to the wall, a string of paper flags she had bought at a market in Coyoacan. But at night, when the city noise faded and the building settled into silence, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a waiting room. As if she was just passing through. As if the real tenant had not arrived yet. Her neighbor across the hall was an elderly woman named Doña Carmen, who had lived in the building for over 40 years. She was small and bent, with milky eyes that seemed to see more than they should. She kept to herself mostly, but sometimes she would catch Lucia in the hallway and grip her arm with surprising strength. "Be careful in this building, mija," she had said once, her voice barely above a whisper. "The walls have memories, and some of those memories are hungry." Lucia had smiled politely and extracted herself from the old woman's grip. She did not believe in such things. Doña Carmen was old, probably senile, and spent too much time watching telenovelas about witches and demons. But sometimes, late at night, when the pipes whispered and the shadows gathered in the corners, Lucia wondered what the old woman had seen in 40 years of living here, what memories the walls might hold. She never asked. She was afraid of the answer. That weekend, she joined a Facebook group for fans of Mana, the rock band she had loved since high school. Music was her escape, the one thing that made her feel less alone. She posted a selfie wearing an old concert t-shirt, wrote something about her favorite album, and went to bed. When she woke up, she had a message from a stranger. His name was Diego Mendoza. His profile picture showed a man in his early 30s, dark hair, pleasant face, standing in front of what looked like a park. His message was simple and polite. Nothing alarming. He had seen her post. He was also a Mana fan. He'd been listening to them since he was a teenager. He asked what her favorite song was. Lucia did not usually respond to messages from strangers. She had learned the hard way that men on the internet were often not what they seemed. But something about Diego's message felt different. There was no creepy compliment, no request for photos, no pressure, just a question about music. She responded. And that was how it began. Over the next 4 weeks, Lucia and Diego talked every day. It started with music, then expanded to movies, books, food, travel. He told her about his job as a civil engineer, about his apartment in Coyoacán, about his mother who had passed away when he was 25. He did not seem to be hiding anything. He did not seem to be trying too hard. He was just present, attentive, interested in everything she had to say. He remembered details. That was what struck her most. When she mentioned offhand that she liked lavender more than roses, he remembered. When she told him about her grandmother's cooking, he asked follow-up questions days later. When she said she was having a bad day, he did not just say sorry, he asked what specifically was wrong and actually listened to the answer. No one had ever listened to her like that. By the 3rd week, they were talking on the phone every night. His voice was warm, deep, but not too deep, with a slight accent she could not place. He laughed easily. He never interrupted. He made her feel like she was the most interesting person in the world. She started thinking about him when she woke up. She started checking her phone every few minutes to see if he had messaged. She started imagining what it would be like to meet him, to touch him, to fall asleep beside him. She was falling in love. But there were things she did not notice, or rather things she noticed and chose to ignore. Diego never video called. He always had an excuse: bad lighting, broken camera, weak internet connection. She offered to call him instead, but he said his phone's front camera was damaged. She believed him because she wanted to believe him. Diego knew things she did not remember telling him. Once he mentioned that her apartment curtains were blue. She had never described her apartment to him. When she asked how he knew, he laughed and said she must have mentioned it. She could not remember doing so, but she let it go. Diego had no photos with friends or family on his profile. No one ever commented on his posts. No one ever tagged him in anything. He existed online as a single point of light, disconnected from everyone except her. And sometimes when she was talking to him late at night, the temperature in her apartment would drop. Just a few degrees, enough to make her skin prickle, enough to make her pull her blanket tighter, but not enough to make her stop talking to him. At the end of the 4th week, Lucia suggested they meet in person. She had been patient long enough. She wanted to see his face, hear his voice without the static of a phone connection, confirm that he was real. Diego agreed immediately. He seemed almost eager. "Let me take you to breakfast," he said. "There is a place I know near your neighborhood. Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. I will come to your building." She gave him the address. She should not have, she knew. All the articles warned against letting strangers know where you lived. But Diego did not feel like a stranger anymore. He felt like the answer to every question she'd been asking herself for 3 months. Saturday arrived. Lucia woke early, nervous and excited. She spent an hour choosing her outfit, another hour on her hair and makeup. She wanted to look perfect. She wanted him to see her and know that he had made the right choice. At 9:45, her phone buzzed. "I am downstairs," Diego wrote. "I brought you something. Look out your window." Lucia walked to the window, heart racing, and looked down at the street. Diego stood on the sidewalk, holding a single yellow marigold flower. He looked up at her window and smiled, raising his hand in a wave. He was handsome. Not movie star handsome, but pleasant, approachable, real. He wore a white button-down shirt and dark jeans. His hair was neatly combed. He looked exactly like his photos. But something was wrong. Lucia squinted, trying to understand what she was seeing. The morning sun was bright, casting sharp shadows on the pavement. Every person on the street had a shadow. The woman walking her dog, the vendor setting up his cart, the children running toward the park. Diego did not. Where his shadow should have been, there was nothing, just sunlight on concrete. Lucia blinked. She rubbed her eyes. She looked again. Still no shadow. It is a trick of the light, she told herself. It is the angle. It is my eyes playing tricks. But her hands were shaking as she grabbed her purse and headed for the door. And deep in her chest, in the place where instinct lives, something was screaming at her to stay inside. She did not listen. She went downstairs to meet him. And that was her first mistake. The first date was perfect. That was the problem. Diego was waiting for her in the lobby, holding the yellow marigold like a small sun in his hands. Up close, he was exactly what his photos had promised. Pleasant features, kind eyes, a smile that seemed genuine. He handed her the flower and said something about how it matched her energy, warm and bright. Lucia laughed, tucked the marigold behind her ear, and told herself she had been imagining things about the shadow. The sun had been at a strange angle. Her eyes had been tired. There was nothing wrong with this man. They walked to a cafe 3 blocks away, a place with checkered tablecloths and the smell of fresh pan dulce drifting from the kitchen. Diego pulled out her chair for her. He asked what she wanted to order and remembered that she preferred café de olla to regular coffee, even though she had only mentioned it once weeks ago in a late-night conversation she barely recalled. He listened when she talked about her work, her family, her dreams of someday opening a small bakery like the one her grandmother had run in Guadalajara. He did not check his phone. He did not look at other women. He looked only at her as if she were the only person in the world. When she asked about his family, his face changed, just for a moment. A flicker of something dark behind his eyes there, and gone so fast she almost missed it. "My mother passed away 5 years ago," he said. "Cancer. It was slow. I was with her at the end." "I am sorry," Lucia said. "Do not be." He smiled, but the smile did not reach his eyes. "She is still with me, in a way." Lucia did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. They finished their coffee. They walked through Parque Mexico, watching the dogs chase each other across the grass, the old men playing chess on stone benches, the couples holding hands beneath the jacaranda trees. Diego bought her an ice cream from a vendor and laughed when she got some on her nose. He wiped it off with his thumb gently, and for a moment his skin felt cold against hers. Cold like metal. Cold like something that had never been warm. She told herself it was the ice cream. She told herself a lot of things that day. When the sun began to set, Diego walked her back to her building. They stood on the sidewalk, the sky turning orange and pink above the rooftops, and he took her hands in his. "I had a wonderful time," he said. "Me too. Can I see you again?" "Yes." The word came out before she could think about it. "Yes, I would like that." He leaned in, and for a moment she thought he was going to kiss her. But he only pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender and old-fashioned that it made her heart ache. Then he stepped back, smiled, and walked away down the street. Lucia watched him go. She watched until he reached the corner, and then something strange happened. He did not turn the corner. He simply stopped existing. One moment he was there, a dark silhouette against the fading light. The next moment he was gone, as if he had stepped through a door that only he could see. She blinked. She must have looked away for a second. She must have missed him turning. She went upstairs and told herself everything was fine. That night she placed the marigold Diego had given her on her altar next to the photographs of her grandmother. She went to bed happy, replaying every moment of the date in her mind. She did not know that the nightmare was just beginning. She woke at exactly 3:33 in the morning. The room was dark. The street outside was silent. Even the pipes, which usually whispered and groaned through the night, were quiet. But she was not alone. She knew it before she saw anything. A feeling heavy and certain, like a hand pressing down on her chest. Someone was in the room with her. Someone was watching. Lucia lay very still, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. The window let in a thin sliver of light from the street lamp outside, just enough to see the outlines of her furniture. The dresser, the chair, the small table where she kept her altar. And in the corner where the light did not reach a shape, it stood motionless, tall, dark, the outline of a person, but wrong somehow, the proportions slightly off the edges, too sharp. It did not move, it did not breathe. It simply stood there facing her, waiting. Lucia's hand moved slowly toward the lamp on her nightstand. Her fingers found the switch. She pressed it. Light flooded the room. The corner was empty. She sat up, breathing hard, scanning every inch of the apartment. Nothing. No one. Just her furniture, her photographs, her paper flags hanging limp in the still air. A dream, she told herself. Just a dream. But when she got out of bed to get a glass of water, her foot touched something on the floor. She looked down. A dried, yellow marigold lay on the wooden boards right beside her bed. The same kind Diego had given her. But the flower he had given her was on her altar across the room where she had placed it before going to sleep. This was a different flower. This one was dead, brittle and brown as if it had been dried for years. Lucia picked it up with trembling fingers. It crumbled slightly at her touch, shedding petals like old skin. She threw it in the trash and went back to bed, but she did not sleep again that night. She lay awake until dawn, watching the corner where the shadow had been waiting for it to return. The strange things continued over the following days. On Tuesday night, Lucia was taking a shower when she heard it. A sound from inside the bathroom, from the other side of the shower curtain. 3 knocks on the bathroom door, from the inside. Knock, knock, knock. But she was alone. She had locked the apartment door. She had checked. Lucia stood under the water, not moving, not breathing, listening. Nothing. Just the sound of water hitting tile. Just her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She turned off the shower, pulled back the curtain slowly, and looked. The bathroom was empty. The door was closed. Everything was exactly as she had left it, except for the mirror. The mirror above the sink was fogged with steam, as it always was after a shower, but this time there was something in the fog. Letters, words, written by a finger that had traced through the condensation. Te amo, I love you. Lucia stared at the words. Her hand reached out almost of its own accord and wiped them away. The glass squeaked. The words disappeared, but she could still feel them somehow, still see them when she closed her eyes. She did not sleep that night either. The next morning she convinced herself it had been some kind of sleepwalking. Maybe she had written the words herself and did not remember. Maybe she was more stressed than she realized. Maybe she needed to talk to someone. But who would believe her? The lights began acting strangely. Whenever she tried to turn on a lamp to check a dark corner, the bulb would flicker and die. She had replaced 3 bulbs in 2 days, and each one failed within hours. An electrician came, checked every outlet, every wire, every connection in the apartment. "Everything is normal, señorita," he said, shrugging. "The wiring is old but functional. I cannot find any problems." He left. That night Lucia sat in the dark because every bulb she had was dead, and she could not afford to buy more until payday. She sat on her bed with her phone flashlight on, watching the shadows gather in the corners, and she felt like the apartment itself was watching her back. Her phone buzzed. A message from Diego. "Are you okay, mi amor? I feel like something is wrong." She typed back, "Just tired. Long week. You should rest. Dream of me tonight." She put the phone down and pulled the blanket over her shoulders. The temperature in the room had dropped. She could see her breath misting in the air even though it was late October. and the nights were not that cold yet. On Thursday, she decided to add extra locks to her door. She did not know why. She could not explain the feeling, the certainty that something was trying to get in. Diego had not done anything threatening. He had not shown up uninvited. He had not said anything that could be considered a red flag. But something inside her, some animal instinct buried deep in her brain, was screaming at her to protect herself. She bought a chain lock from a hardware store and installed it herself. She bought a door wedge and placed it under the door at night. She checked the locks 3 times before going to bed. That night she woke at 3:33 again. The room was dark. The street was silent. And somewhere in the apartment she heard a sound. Metal on metal. A soft clink, then a thud. The sound of the chain lock hitting the floor. Lucia sat up so fast she almost fell out of bed. She grabbed her phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it at the door. The chain was still in place. The locks were still engaged. The door wedge was still under the door, but on the door handle, glistening in the beam of her flashlight, was a wet handprint. Water, or something that looked like water. It dripped slowly down the handle, pooling on the floor beneath. Lucia did not get out of bed. She did not investigate. She sat with her back against the headboard and her flashlight aimed at the door, and she waited for morning. When the sun finally came up, she went to check. The handprint was gone. The floor was dry. There was no sign that anything had happened. But she knew what she had seen. Later that day, she tried to call her mother in Guadalajara. The call would not connect. She tried again and again, but each time she heard only static, a crackling emptiness that sounded almost like whispering. She tried to call her friend Mariana. Same result. Static. Whispers. Nothing. She checked her Wi-Fi. The signal was strong. She checked her phone. Full bars. Everything should have worked. But every time she tried to reach someone, the connection failed, except when Diego messaged her. His messages came through instantly every time, as if there was nothing blocking them, as if the interference only applied to everyone else. Mi amor, he wrote that afternoon. I had a dream about you last night. What kind of dream? You were sleeping. You looked so peaceful. You were wearing a blue nightgown. Lucia's blood turned to ice. She had worn a blue nightgown last night. She had bought it a month ago, had never worn it before, had never photographed it or mentioned it to anyone. There was no way Diego could have known. How did you know what I was wearing? I told you, mi amor. It was a dream, just a dream. He added a winking emoji. Lucia did not respond. On Friday afternoon, Diego suggested they meet again. Saturday morning he wrote, 10 o'clock. I will come to your building. I have a surprise for you. Lucia wanted to say no. Every instinct told her to say no, but her fingers typed yes before her brain could stop them, as if someone else was controlling her hands. She spent Friday night unable to sleep, watching the shadows in the corners, listening for the knocking that she knew would come. It came at 3:33, as always. 3 knocks. From inside the wall this time. She did not get up. She did not investigate. She just lay there clutching her pillow, waiting for dawn. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Lucia woke early, but she did not feel excited this time. She felt afraid. She moved through the motions of getting ready, choosing her clothes, doing her hair, but her hands were shaking and her stomach was tight with dread. At 9:30, her phone buzzed. I am on my way, Diego wrote. I have something special for you. Then, a few minutes later, look out your window when I arrive. You are going to love this. At 9:45, Lucia heard something outside, the rumble of a large engine. The sound of doors opening and closing, men's voices speaking in low tones. She went to the window and looked down. Her blood turned to ice. Diego stood on the sidewalk holding a bouquet of yellow marigolds. He was smiling up at her window, that same pleasant smile he had worn on their first date. But he was not alone. Behind him, parked at the curb, was a large moving truck. the kind you rent when you are relocating your entire life. Two men in work clothes were unloading furniture from the back. A mattress wrapped in plastic, a wooden wardrobe, boxes stacked on a dolly. And on top of one of the boxes, clearly visible even from 4 stories up, was something that made Lucia's heart stop. An altar. A small altar like the ones families build for Dia de los Muertos. Candles, yellow marigolds, and photographs. Photographs of her. Dozens of them. Photographs of her walking to work. Photographs of her sitting in the cafe where they had their first date. Photographs of her sleeping, in her apartment, in her bed. Photographs taken through her window. Diego raised his hand and waved. Her phone buzzed. "Do you see, mi amor? I brought everything we need. I brought a new bed for us. I brought my things. We are going to live together now. We are going to be so happy. I have been waiting for this for so long. So very, very long." Lucia stumbled back from the window. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. She ran to the door, checked the locks. The chain was in place. The deadbolt was engaged. The door wedge was secure. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Static. Whispers. No connection. She tried her mother. Static. She tried Mariana. Static. She ran to Doña Carmen's door across the hall and pounded on it with her fists. "Doña Carmen, please, I need help." No answer. No sound from inside. She pounded harder. "Doña Carmen." The door swung open. Not all the way, just a crack, but enough to see darkness beyond thick and impenetrable, as if the old woman's apartment had been filled with ink. Doña Carmen. A smell drifted out, sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in a vase, like something dead. Lucia stepped back, her hand over her mouth, and then she heard it. Footsteps in the stairwell, slow, deliberate, coming up 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors. The footsteps stopped at the 4th floor. Lucia backed toward her apartment door. Her eyes were fixed on the stairwell entrance on the corner where whoever was coming would appear. Diego stepped into view. He was still holding the marigolds. He was still smiling, but something was different now. Something was wrong. His eyes were darker than she remembered, almost black, and they did not reflect the light from the hallway. His skin was paler, almost gray, and his smile was too wide, stretching his face in a way that did not look human. "Lucia," he said. His voice was the same, but there was an echo behind it now, as if someone else was speaking the same words a half-second later. "Why did you not come down? I was waiting for you." She did not answer. She could not. Her voice was frozen in her throat. Diego took a step toward her, then another. "I brought everything, mi amor, everything we need to be together. You do not have to be alone anymore. I will never leave you. I will never abandon you. We will be together forever." He was close now, close enough that she could smell him. Not cologne, not sweat, but something else, something old and damp, like a basement that had been closed for decades, like a grave. "All you have to do is let me in," he said. "Just open the door. Let me in, and the loneliness ends forever." His hand reached toward her face. Those fingers which she had thought were elegant now looked too long, too thin. The nails were yellow and cracked like old bone. Lucia found her voice. "No." Diego's smile faltered. "What?" I said. "No, stay away from me." She turned and ran into her apartment, slamming the door behind her. She threw the deadbolt. She hooked the chain. She shoved the door wedge into place. For a moment there was silence. Then the knocking began. Knock, knock, knock. Lucia Diego's voice came through the door, still pleasant, still calm. "Open the door, mi amor. Do not make this difficult." She did not answer. She backed away from the door, her eyes fixed on it, waiting for it to burst open. Knock, knock, knock. "I have been waiting for you for so long, Lucia. 40 years. Do you know how long 40 years is? Do you know what it is like to wait in the dark alone for someone to love you? 40 years. Lucia's mind raced. Diego had said he was 32. 40 years ago he would not have been born yet. Unless Diego was not who he said he was. Unless Diego had never been alive at all. Knock, knock, knock. "You cannot hide from me, Lucia. You invited me in. When you responded to my message, when you talked to me every night, when you dreamed of me, that was an invitation, and I accepted. The door shook, the chain rattled, the wood groaned, and then from somewhere behind her, inside the apartment, she heard something else. 3 knocks from inside the wall. Knock, 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 and a whisper right next to her ear. "Let him in, Lucia. Let him in." Lucia screamed. She spun around, but there was no one behind her. Just her apartment, her furniture, her photographs on the wall. But the whisper had been real. She had felt breath on her ear, cold and damp, like air from a crypt. The knocking at the door stopped. Silence. Heavy and complete. Then Diego's voice, lower now, almost a growl. "You cannot escape me, Lucia. No matter where you run, I will find you. I have all the time in the world." She heard footsteps retreating down the hallway, the creak of the stairwell door, then nothing. Lucia stood in the middle of her apartment, trembling. Her phone was still in her hand, useless. The walls pressed in around her, suddenly claustrophobic, suddenly hostile. She had to get out. She grabbed her purse, shoved her wallet and phone inside, and went to the door. She pressed her eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty, but Doña Carmen's door was still open. That crack of darkness, that smell of rot. Lucia opened her door slowly, quietly. She stepped into the hallway, her eyes fixed on the stairwell, her body tense and ready to run. She should have kept walking. She should have gone straight down the stairs and out of the building. But something pulled her toward Doña Carmen's door. Some need to know. Some terrible curiosity that she could not resist. She pushed the door open. The smell hit her first. Sweet and rotten, thick enough to taste. Then the darkness which seemed to swallow the light from the hallway, refusing to let it penetrate. Doña Carmen Lucia whispered. No answer. She reached inside and felt along the wall for a light switch. Found it. Flipped it. Nothing happened. She pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it into the apartment. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing shapes. Furniture, a couch, a television, a table covered with photographs and candles, an altar like the one Lucia kept in her own apartment, and on the floor in front of the altar a shape, Doña Carmen. The old woman lay on her back, her arms crossed over her chest, her eyes open and staring at the ceiling. Her face was frozen in an expression of terror, mouth open in a silent scream. And around her neck, dark and deep, was a bruise, a line, the mark of something that had wrapped around her throat and squeezed. Lucia stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth. She turned and ran. Down the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, her feet slipping on the worn stone. Through the lobby, past the empty doorman station, out into the street. The moving truck was gone. Diego was gone. The sidewalk was empty except for a few pedestrians who did not look at her, did not notice her, did not care. She ran. She did not know where she was going. She just ran, one foot in front of the other, her lungs burning, her heart pounding. She ran until she could not run anymore, until she found herself in front of a small hotel on the other side of the city, one she had stayed at once before, when her apartment was being fumigated. She went inside. She asked for a room. She paid in cash. She took the elevator to the highest floor and locked herself in. For a few hours she felt safe. She sat on the bed and tried to think. She needed to call the police. She needed to report what she had seen in Doña Carmen's apartment. She needed to tell someone about Diego, about the stalking, about the photographs. She tried her phone again. Still no signal. Still just static and whispers. She went to the hotel phone on the nightstand. Picked up the receiver. Dead. She went to the front desk. Asked to use their phone. "I am sorry, señorita," the receptionist said. "Our phone lines are down. Some problem with the system." Lucia went back to her room. She locked the door. She pushed the dresser in front of it. And she waited. She woke at 3:33 in the morning. The room was pitch black. No light from the window, no glow from the hallway. She reached for the lamp on the nightstand. Nothing happened. She clicked it again. Again. The light would not turn on. Her hand fumbled for her phone. She found it, pressed the button for the flashlight. The beam flickered on, casting harsh white light across the room, and she saw him. Diego stood at the foot of the bed. No, not Diego. something else, something that had been wearing Diego like a mask and had now let the mask slip. The face that looked down at her was gray, the skin stretched tight over bones that were too sharp. The eyes were empty sockets, black holes that somehow still managed to see. The mouth stretched from ear to ear, filled with teeth that had grown long and sharp in the darkness. Around the neck, dark and deep, was a bruise, a line, the mark of a rope. "Do you see now?" the thing asked. Its voice was no longer pleasant. It was the sound of dirt falling on a coffin lid, the sound of fingernails scraping against wood. "Do you see what I really am?" Lucia could not move, could not scream, could only stare at the horror before her. "My name was Ernesto," the thing said. "I lived in your building, in your apartment. 40 years ago, I loved a woman who did not love me back. On the night before her wedding, I hanged myself from the ceiling beam, the same beam above your bed, Lucia. I have been there ever since, waiting, watching, hoping. It took a step closer. The floorboards did not creak. It made no sound at all. You look so much like her, Lucia, the same eyes, the same smile, the same way of tilting your head when you listen. I knew the moment I saw you that you were meant for me, that God had finally answered my prayers. Another step, close enough to touch, but you rejected me, just like she did. You ran from me, just like she did." The mouth stretched wider. The teeth gleamed in the light of her phone. "I will not let you get away again!" It lunged. Lucia rolled off the bed, hitting the floor hard. She scrambled to her feet and ran for the door, shoving the dresser aside with strength born of pure terror. Her hands fumbled with the lock, the chain, her fingers slipping on the metal. The thing that had been Diego, that had been Ernesto, was behind her. She could feel its cold breath on her neck, could hear its voice whispering in her ear. "You cannot escape me. You can never escape me." She got the door open and ran, down the hallway, down the stairs. Through the lobby, out into the street. She did not stop running until she saw lights. Real lights, the warm glow of candles through stained glass windows. A church. She ran inside. The church was small and old, with wooden pews and a painted ceiling, and the smell of incense thick in the air. A few old women knelt in prayer. A priest stood at the altar, his back to the congregation. Lucia collapsed into a pew and sobbed. She did not know how long she sat there, long enough for the priest to notice her, long enough for him to come and sit beside her, his face lined with decades of service, his eyes kind but tired. "You are troubled, my child," he said. It was not a question. She told him everything, the messages, the dates, the shadow without a shadow, the thing in her apartment, the thing in the hotel, the thing that had once been a man named Ernesto, who had hanged himself 40 years ago. The priest listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "There are things in this world that most people refuse to see," he said. "Things that exist in the spaces between light and shadow. They are drawn to loneliness, to despair, to the empty places in our hearts." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small medallion. "San Miguel Arcangel," the Archangel Michael. He pressed it into her hand. "This will help," he said, "but it will not be enough. These things, these spirits that refuse to move on, they can only be defeated by the living, by someone who refuses to be claimed, who refuses to be owned." He looked into her eyes. "You must confront him, my child. You must face him and tell him that you do not belong to him, that he has no claim on you. It must be done in a place of power where the boundary between the living and the dead is thin, and it must be done with conviction, with faith. Not faith in God necessarily, but faith in yourself," where Lucia asked. "Where can I do this?" The priest was silent for a moment. "The cemetery," he said. "During Dia de los Muertos, when the dead walk among us and the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. That is where you will find him. And that is where you must end this." Lucia took a bus to Guadalajara that morning. 6 hours of watching the landscape change outside the window. the urban sprawl giving way to fields and mountains. 6 hours of clutching the medallion in her hand, feeling its warmth, trying to believe that it could protect her. Her mother was waiting at the station. She was a small woman, gray-haired and soft around the middle, with a face that had seen hard times and survived them. She took one look at Lucia and pulled her into a hug so tight it squeezed the air from her lungs. At home, Lucia told her everything. Her mother listened, and when Lucia finished, she said the words that Lucia had been hoping to hear, "I believe you." Her mother went to a cabinet and pulled out an old book, leather-bound and yellowed with age. "This was your grandmother's," she said. "She used it to help people who were haunted. People like you." She opened it to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "The ritual is simple. You must confront the spirit in a place of power. You must speak his true name. And you must tell him in your own words that you reject him, that you do not belong to him, that he has no claim on you." She closed the book. "The only way to survive is to believe that you are stronger than he is, that your will is greater than his hunger." That night at midnight they went to the cemetery. It was old and sprawling, the stone walls covered in moss, the iron gates creaking as they opened. During Dia de los Muertos, the place would have been alive with candles and flowers and families celebrating the dead. But at midnight the living had gone home. Only the dead remained. Lucia's mother stopped at the entrance. "I cannot go with you," she said. "This is something you must do alone." She pressed the bottle of holy water into Lucia's hand along with a bag of salt and the medallion of San Miguel. "Come back to me, mija. Promise me." "I promise." Lucia walked into the cemetery. The path wound between the tombs, narrow and uneven. Candles still flickered on some of the graves. The moon was full, casting silver light over the tombstones. She found the mausoleum at the center, an old structure built for a family that had died out long ago. The door stood open, revealing darkness within. She stepped inside, and he was waiting for her. Ernesto stood in the shadows, his true face visible now, gray and terrible and hungry. He smiled when he saw her, that too wide smile, full of jagged teeth. "You came," he said. "I knew you would." "I came to end this," Lucia said. Her voice was steadier than she expected. "End this." Ernesto laughed. "You cannot end this. We are meant to be together, forever." He moved toward her, those long fingers reaching for her face. Lucia held up the medallion. "In the name of San Miguel, I reject you," Ernesto hissed, stepping back, but he did not stop. "I reject your false love," Lucia continued. She threw the holy water at him. It hit his face, and he screamed, his skin smoking where it touched. "I reject your obsession." She threw the salt at his feet. His shadow began to dissolve where the grains touched. "I reject 40 years of darkness and hunger." She stepped toward him, even as every instinct screamed at her to run. "You have no claim on me. I am not the woman who rejected you. I am not your salvation. I am nothing to you." Ernesto was on his knees now, his form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You cannot do this," he hissed. "I earned you. You are mine." "I was never yours," Lucia said, "and I never will be." She spoke the final words from her grandmother's book. Ernesto screamed. His form dissolved, breaking apart like smoke in a strong wind. The empty eyes stared at her with hatred, with longing, with something that might have been despair. "This is not over," he whispered. "It is never over." And then he was gone. Lucia stood alone in the mausoleum, trembling, exhausted, but alive. She had won. Her mother was waiting at the gates. She took one look at Lucia's face and burst into tears, pulling her into an embrace that seemed to last forever. "It is done," Lucia whispered. "He is gone. You are safe now." Her mother stroked her hair. "You are safe." They drove home in silence. Lucia leaned her head against the window and watched the empty streets slide past the familiar landmarks of her childhood, the places where she had played and laughed and dreamed of a future full of love. She was home. She was safe. She slept for 14 hours. When she woke, the sun was streaming through the window of her childhood bedroom, warm and golden. She could hear her mother in the kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans, the smell of coffee and eggs, normal sounds, safe sounds. Lucia got out of bed and went to the bathroom. She splashed water on her face, looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired, older, but alive. She was about to turn away when she saw it. In the mirror behind her reflection in the corner of the bathroom where the light did not quite reach. A shadow. Lucia spun around. The corner was empty. She looked back at the mirror. The shadow was still there. Faint, almost invisible, but there. And it was smiling. Lucia backed out of the bathroom, her heart pounding. She told herself it was nothing, a trick of the light, her imagination still recovering from the trauma of the past weeks. She went to the kitchen. Her mother looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mia. How do you feel, fine?" Lucia said. She did not mention the shadow. After breakfast, she went to the front door to get some fresh air. She opened it and looked out at the garden. There was a package on the doorstep, small, wrapped in brown paper, no return address. Lucia's blood turned to ice. She picked it up with trembling hands. She tore open the paper. Inside was a dried yellow marigold and a photograph. The photograph showed Lucia sleeping in this house, in her childhood bedroom, last night. The angle was from the foot of the bed looking down at her peaceful face. On the back of the photograph, written in small, careful letters, "Did you really think it would be that easy, mi amor, I told you? I am patient. I have waited 40 years. I can wait a little longer. You rejected me once. She rejected me once. But I am still here. I will always be here. And one day when you least expect it, when you have forgotten to be afraid, I will come for you again. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon, very soon. Forever yours, E." Lucia dropped the photograph. She looked at the street, at the houses, at the people walking by. No one was watching. No one was there. But she knew with a certainty that settled into her bones like ice that he was out there, somewhere, waiting. That night she lay in bed with the lights on. The medallion was clutched in her hand. The holy water was on her nightstand. She told herself she was safe. She almost believed it. Then, at exactly 3:33 in the morning, she heard it. 3 knocks, not from the door, not from the window, from inside the wall. Knock, 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 and then faint but unmistakable a whisper, "Lucia." She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply lay there in the light clutching the medallion and waited for dawn. Because she understood now. Some things do not end. Some things only pause. And some things, no matter how far you run, no matter how hard you fight, will follow you forever. That is my story. That is what happened to me. I am still here, still alive, still waiting. Every night at 3:33, I hear the knocks. Every morning I check the doorstep for packages. Every time I look in a mirror, I search the shadows for a face that is not my own. He has not come for me yet, but he will. I know he will. If you are listening to this, if you have ever met someone online who seemed too perfect, who remembered every detail, who made you feel like you were the only person in the world, I have one piece of advice. Look at their shadow. Look at their reflection. And if something seems wrong, if something feels off, trust your instincts, run. Because the thing about monsters is this: they do not always look like monsters. Sometimes they look like the love of your life. And by the time you realize the truth, it is already too late. The dead do not rest during Dia de los Muertos. They walk among us. They watch us. They wait. And some of them are very, very patient. Have you ever encountered something you could not explain? Have you ever felt watched in your own home? Have you ever met someone who seemed too good to be true? Tell me your story in the comments below, because the more we share, the more we know. And the more we know, the harder it is for them to hide. Stay safe. Stay vigilant. And whatever you do, do not answer the door at 3:33 in the morning. You never know who might be knocking.